Hello, crafty friends. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm Candy Thomas, and I'm here for the Altenew Watercolor Wonders video hop. I'm so happy that you stopped by. The theme is watercolor, so let's get into creating these gorgeous cards with these beautiful watercolor flowers. Let's get into making this gorgeous card. Look at those beautiful watercolor flowers. So those were created using various Altenew products, and specifically I wanted to demonstrate the Craft Your Life kit. Here are the dies in this kit. This is the Craft Your Life Elegant Motifs. Here are the stamps in this kit as well. I'm going to use that bottom corner stamp, and I'm also going to use that large, gorgeous bloom. And I'll also be using that small sentiment that you see up there for a cute added interest. And then I'll be using the Altenew Checkered Diamonds Embossing folder, which will give it more depth. And here are the stencils that come in the set. They're layering stencils, and they're so great to use. And to color the flowers, I'm using this Watercolor Essential set from Altenew. Gorgeous set. I have loved using it and it lasts a while. We have a card base of 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. It's top folding. I have 2 matte panels at 4 by 5 1/4. And I'll also be using embossing panels at 3 1/2 by 4 3/4. Here you see me rounding my corners for my matte panels, and it gives it a nice finished look. I'm using an envelope punched around it, but you can always use a crocodile. You can hand cut it, anything that you have on hand just to give it that nice finish. And this is my favorite glue I use. I get it from Amazon. And now I am just adding glue to the back of these panels, and I'm going to adhere them to the card bases. This gives another nice finished look, and it takes a darker color. That way it will pop against some of the lighter colors that we'll be using for our embossing panel and for the other. Here I'm using a dark teal, but I also found in my paper stash, I found this really pretty, almost looks like a watercolor or alcohol ink splash, but it's just completely designer paper, and I cut it down to this map. So now I'm going to be embossing that panel, and first I'm spritzing it with some water. I learned this fun trick from Jennifer McGuire, and I have used it ever since. When you spritz the panel with the water, it helps it to where your card does not break whenever you go through embossing. And I'm using my Spellbinders Platinum 6 machine. Any machine will work, but you'll just have to figure out your sandwich for whichever machine that you have to make it go well. And I'm running it forwards and backwards to ensure I get a really good impression. And look at that detail. It looks gorgeous, and even in person looks even better. And this was the panel for the second card that I also did. The detail is just gorgeous. And now to finish these off, to make it mimic the rounded matte panels, I am going to round the corners of these embossed panels as well. And once I finish that, I'm going to add some craft foam to the back of these embossed panels to kind of raise it up to give a little bit more dimension and a little bit more interest for the card. And you can use foam dimensional tape, but I tend to use a lot of times either extra spare cardstock, or if I have it on hand, this craft foam. The craft foam is a nice thin texture. It's not too thin, but it's not too thick either. And I love how it makes it softer. Sometimes when you use scraps of the cardstock, it gives it a harder feel, and I like that better for my die cut pieces. But whenever I'm doing panels, I tend to go for this craft foam for the back. So I'm just going to adhere this craft foam. I'm going to do this for each of those embossed panels and then adhere it to my card base. Once I adhere this second panel to my card, then I'm going to get ready to start my stamping for the flowers. So first I'm going to stamp that bottom corner rounded stamp, the one with the larger flower and the leaves. And I'm actually stamping this on watercolor paper. You'll see me prepping it with my anti-static powder first. This will help whenever I emboss with the white embossing powder. I'll be able to see it. And I ink it up with Versamark ink. And then I'm stamping it on there. Of course, it'll be hard to tell in the video that it's stamped. And then I'm going to take that large pretty bloom, and I'm also going to ink it up in Versamark ink, or Altenew has a great embossing ink as well, and I'm going to stamp it on there. Now I'm going to add that white embossing powder. I'm going to pour it over a coffee filter so that it won't get everywhere on my work surface. You'll want to make sure that you get the embossing powder completely over the entire image, so that way it will give you the good lines that you need. And then I go through with a paintbrush, a dry paintbrush, and just remove any excess powder. Next, we're going to heat set it, so I'll use my heat tool and go over it, and I will keep heating it until the powder melts. And as you can see on the video, you're able to see those really nice lines from the stamped image. I'm going to do that for both of these. Now, let's get started watercoloring. First, I am going to wet both of those flowers over the embossed image. And don't worry about the embossed image getting wet. It doesn't affect it at all. And you can always wipe any of the paint color dry once you start. I'm going to put my largest layering stencil down. Then I'm going to go in with this yellow color. And I'm going to paint all of the flower portions for that corner flower. I'm going to paint it in this light yellow. You can kind of see how it gets pretty light. So I decided after it kind of dried just a little bit that it was still too light. So I went back in with a darker goldy yellow, and I like that a lot better. I felt like it was a lot more visible because I did one that was really light yellow and it almost looked just like a light cream. So this color adds a lot more interest and it pops a little bit more. And now I'm going to take up this first layering stencil and I'm going to kind of pat it a little bit dry. And now I'm going to go in with a darker color with a second layer for this stencil. I'm going to go over on both of the flowers with that brownish color. And don't worry about it, because if you use more water, it just gets it a little bit darker toned, almost like a deeper gold color once it's dry. It doesn't look like it's really splotchy as it does right here. Following the same pattern, I'm going to kind of pat it dry just a little bit. And now I am going to put down the other stencil to start on my leaves. And I'm just going to go in and paint those with that beautiful green color. I'm going to do the smaller leaves and then the larger cluster of leaves. And I'm going to keep going back in to add a little bit more depth. As the paint dries, I go in with less water and I will kind of start in the middle to make it a little darker in the middle to give more depth. And then I'm going to paint that top little scroll there in a teal color. So that's going to match our panels that we put down underneath the embossing panel. And next, I'm going to be starting on that pinkish rose. I put the larger open area down first, and then I'm going to paint over it with that gorgeous pink color. And the darker, if you use the less water, it'll almost be like Altenew's Rubelite color. But right now, I'm just using a little bit more water to keep it from being so dark. And I'm also going to pat that dry. I'm going to go in and paint those leaves green as well, doing the same thing, adding the depth. Now I'm going to add the second layering stencil for that flower to give more dimension to that flower, a little bit more depth with the color. And I'm going to be using that red. And actually, whenever it dries, it combines very nicely. But I'm going to go over it with that red, and look how beautiful that flower is. I'm going to pat it dry just a little bit, and look at the gorgeous color. You have depth, they have a little bit of shadow there, and both of those look great. And now I'm going to use those dies that came with the set, and then I'm going to run it through my Anna Griffin embossing machine. It's an electric embossing machine. It makes it a little bit faster. And look at the detail with it. It even gives a light little impression around, and I love how there's not too much white space around. So now I'm going to go through to add these on my card panels. I'm going to put foam dimensional tape. And since I'm putting foam dimensional tape on that largest flower, whenever I adhere this second flower, I have to double up the foam tape underneath where it's not touching the pink flower. And I'm just going to do the same thing that I did for the other card. And remember, once again, whenever you're putting your foam tape on the yellow, you need to make sure you double it up on the yellow part, because that pink is already raised, so you want it to be even. And look how pretty this looks. So now I'm going to get ready to stamp my sentiment. I use my anti-static powder. I'm stamping it twice. It's a really tiny sentiment, and I'm going to use the white embossing powder. I'm going to heat set that. Then I'm going to cut it. And you'll notice that I'm cutting it with using a fishtail banner. You just cut a little small bit in the middle, and then you cut diagonally on one end, and then I tend to turn it over to make sure it's even, and cut on the opposite side as well to give an even fishtail banner. If you have dies for that, you can use it, but I just do it myself a lot of times. And then I'm going to put some foam dimensional tape underneath that, and then stick it right underneath that yellow flower. I'm going to do the same thing for the other card, and look how beautiful these are. Now I need to score that on both of my cards, and I'm going to add my personalized stamp for my people, for the whoever gets it. And I'm going to finalize this card with those gorgeous honey bee clear small dewdrops. They are so pretty, and it looks like little water droplets are falling all around it. I'm going to do that to both of my cards. Look how gorgeous these cards turned out. All of the products are linked below in the description. Also, don't forget to look for the next stop in Altenew's Watercolor Wonders video hop. We appreciate you for joining. Have a wonderful day.